Welcome back, my lovely Lovecraftian. Soon, what may be the final upload that you'll ever see of me in this form. Today, we'll be reading a part of Borrasca, Part 3. So, turn off your lights and open your eyes to horrors unknown to you as well as to me. This story is by C.K. Walker, Borrasca, Part 3. Do you think she blames herself? I don't know, ma'am. Probably. I stretched out to recline on the seat of my Chevy and pulled the bill of my hat lower over my eyes. But do you think she's okay? I didn't answer him. I certainly hadn't been okay when Whitney died, and Kimber was even closer to her mom than I was to my sister. She was definitely not okay. Sam, seriously? I'm fucking freaking out here. It's been 2 days. I pushed my hat up off my face and looked over at Kyle, who was eminently a wreck. His eyes were bloodshot, his face sallow, and his red hair was greasy. Dude, her mom committed suicide. You know how Kimber was to her mom. She just needs some time, but she'll be okay. She hasn't answered any of my texts or calls. I've left her like 9 voicemails. Man, I think I'm going crazy. You just have to give her space. Yeah, but she's you still getting Seder on me. I'm supposed to be looking after her. I sat up and pulled the chair up right behind me. Look, Kyle, I know you want to help Kimber, and I want to help Kimber too. She hasn't answered her calls, been to school, or come to the door when we stop by her house. She doesn't want to see us right now. We have to be okay with that, right? Now, Kimber knows what's best for Kimber, okay? What about the suicide note? You think that has something to do with it? I sighed. We don't even know if there was a note. Kimber's dad was upset and messed up when he said that, and it's possible I misheard him anyways. I asked my dad, and he said there was no letter. Right, because your dad is such a beacon of truth. One look at Kyle told me he immediately regretted his words. I shrugged. I don't know what to believe anymore. The truth was, I knew what I heard. Mr. Diastro had said something to the cops about a letter, but I couldn't tell Kyle that. Not right now. He was already worried about his relationship with Kimber. It was part of the reason her mom had been so depressed. I'd asked my dad about the letter when he'd come home after that long night, and he sighed and ran both of his hands through his hair in a tired way and said, Sam, I don't know what to tell you. Eddie, the Astro, didn't leave a suicide note, and this is the first I've heard of it. With our best friend in mourning and our investigation on hold, Cal and I had been existing in a sort of suspended state. We've been to school intermediately, skipping classes here and there, missing end-of-the-year tests and smoking more weed than either of us could afford. Without Kimber there to set us straight and keep us in line, we were lethargic, brooding, and irresponsible. I never realized how much I relied on her. Kyle and I skipped the last 2 periods of the day and debated on whether we should even go to school tomorrow, which was the last day of our sophomore year. We finally decided to show up for 2nd period, which I was glad we did because Kimber showed up to biology. I didn't even see her at first. I had my head down on my desk, resting on folded arms, when I felt a meek hand pat my shoulder. I turned around to see her, standing there, looking unsure and uncomfortable. I gave her half a smile and pulled her into a hug, but it wasn't a super comforting, not all awkward Kimber hug. It was a longer, weaker hug, and I felt so protective in it. I was sad when it was over. How are you doing, Kay? I asked her before she released me. Kimber wiped a tear off her cheek. I'm okay. And she gave me a wobbly smile. I knew it wasn't true. I wrapped her into another quick hug as Phoebe Stranger gave us a snotty look. Have you seen Kyle yet? No. I have next period with him. He's been worried about you. I know, she said, sliding her eyes to the floor. Things have been really hard for me at home. It's okay, I said. We're here for whatever you need. Yeah, that's what I was hoping. Whatever you need. Since it was the last day of school, our teacher, Mr. Founder, was just happy to return our graded test and let us bullshit the rest of the period. Kimber talked about arrangements for the funeral that weekend and chided Kyle and I for skipping finals to get stoned. But when the bell rang, I could see that Kimber was both excited and nervous to see Kyle. As we packed her bags, I assured her Kyle wasn't mad. He was just worried about her. She threw her bag over her shoulder, set her jaw, and nodded. Well, I'm just trying to keep it together. As soon as Kyle saw her from down the hall, he slammed his locker shut, walked towards us with such intensity that I began to wonder if maybe he was mad. He pushed past a dozen people without so much as glancing at them, left a curious, if annoyed crowd in its wake. When he finally reached us, Kyle threw his backpack against the wall and swooped Kimber up in the sort of way you'd see in old black and white movies. Everyone who watched all this unfold, including me, groaned in unison. The type of groan that you would let out when you're 5 years old and your parents were kissing. A nice, hearty, ugh. Since most of the teachers weren't even bothering to take attendance that day, I went to calculus with Kimber and Kyle, where they had the same conversation Kimber and I had last period. Towards the end of the hour, the conversation faltered and became uneasy. Kyle and I exchanged a look over the top of Kimber's head, and I nodded at him. Kimber, he said quietly, did your mom leave a letter? What? Kimber asked in surprise. I heard your dad talking about a letter on that day. On Tuesday, I said. Oh. As we waited for her to continue, the bell rang for lunch. Everyone filed out of the room, but the three of us stayed, still sitting on our desks. Kimber, I finally said. She sighed sadly and looked over at Kyle. Yes. What did it say? He asked nervously. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I asked my dad for it when we got home, and he said I misheard him and there was no letter. He said not to mention it to anyone else, or I'd just upset people. Well, then we both misheard him, I said, which seems unlikely. I've known my dad all my life, and I know when he's lying. People started to filter in for the next period, sliding sympathetic glances at Kimber. Since it was our lunch period, we gathered up our things and walked out to my car, as we always did. I sat in the back seat, letting Kyle and Kimber take the front. Kimber took a deep breath and continued. I know my dad is lying. I know he has the letter. Are you sure? Kyle asked. I could tell he was terrified that some of the blame rested on him. Yeah, and I know it contains the name Prescott. I think I even know where it is. Prescott, yet somehow I wasn't surprised. He was the axis around which everything that was bad orbited. How do you know it's his Prescott? Kyle asked. I heard my dad reading it once. I think he reads it a lot, actually. He was sort of sobbing and whispering the words and throwing things in his office. My dad, he has not been well. Do you think she was having an affair with Jimmy Prescott? I shook my head. I'm guessing you need to think bigger than that, Kyle. I agree, Kimber said, to her hands in her lap. With everything we know about the Prescotts, I'm fairly sure this isn't about an affair. It's all connected somehow, don't you think? Well, my dad was the love of my mom's life. She only left a letter for me. I think that somehow I'm the one she wronged, not him, you know? I think she did something to me, or maybe she did it because of me. Kimber's voice broke over the last sentence, and Kyle pulled her over, kissed the top of her head, and whispered words to her that I couldn't hear, but I'm sure it was something corny, like, I love you, or it'll be all okay, as long as I'm here for you. So, we need to get the letter, I said, after giving them a minute. Yes, I really need to read it. Kimber's voice was still wobbly. How do we get it, I asked. If it's in the office, we just need to wait until our dad isn't home, Kyle said as he looked out the window. You don't think I thought of that, Kimber sighed. He never leaves his office, not since we got home from the hospital. He sleeps in there. So, we need to get him out. No, we need to get me in. Tomorrow is my mom's funeral, and half of Drisking will be there, including my dad, of course. I need to leave without him noticing and run home so I can go through the office. Okay, that's easy, I said, without my dad noticing, and I need to be back by the end of the service. We both nodded, but stayed silent. It looked like Kimber was weighing on saying more. My dad, he's been very cold, and I think he blames me, Kimber finally said. That's bullshit, Kyle spat. Can you guys help me? Absolutely, of course, anytime. We spent the rest of the lunch hour creating a plan far more strategic than the mission probably needed. Kyle and I would engage Mr. Diastro in a conversation, and then Kyle would get a text from Kimber telling him she was having a breakdown in the bathroom. Kyle would leave to go comfort her, and they would take my car to Diastro's house. I would stay behind and keep an eye on Kimber's dad while they were gone. I went to work that afternoon for the first time since Monday. Miata seemed to be in a much better mood and let me go home early since it was a Friday. I didn't sleep well, though. I got up at 4 a.m. to go through my clothes, looking for something dressy and black to wear for the funeral. My dad came in before he left for work and found his disabled, panicked teenage son looking helplessly through piles of black clothing. He smiled pityingly and led me to his own closet. Since my dad and I not only had the same face, but the same build, as well as finding something suitable to wear, this was easy. I thanked him, and he asked me to apologize to Kimber for having to work through the service, and that he sends his love. Annie Diastro's funeral was at the Epicolasm Church, on the other side of town. I picked Kyle up at 9, and Salty was also wearing a suit of his dad's, though he didn't fit as nearly well. He was constantly pulling at sleeves and readjusting the waistline. Unfortunately for Kyle, he was much smaller than his dad. We parked as far away from the church as possible, where we hoped no one would notice a car leaving. When we went inside the church, we saw Kimber wouldn't have to do much acting to convince people she was having a breakdown. We found her at the back of the room, tucked into a chair, in a puddle of curly orange hair and tears. Kyle sat down next to her and pulled her into a hug. Jesus, Kimber, what's wrong? I kicked his foot and shot him a look, like really. Kyle bit his lip. Fuck. There's no one here. Kimber whispered against his chest. My mom grew up here. She had hundreds of friends in this town, and no one came. We looked around, I had to admit. Turnout was sparse. A few groups of 3 or 4 people standing together. Kimber's dad, who sat in the chair opposite of the room of his daughter, with his head in his hands. And some family I recognized from barbecues at Kimber's house. Ex-Sheriff Clary with his wife Grace were there, standing with a few of Dad's deputies, talking quietly in the corner. I could see why Kimber was so upset. As we waited for the service to start, I realized I'd never been to a funeral before. I wished that we'd had one for my sister. I knew we never could since Whitney was still legally alive. It made me sad to think that she would never have been laid to rest. Only a few other funeral goers trickled in, and the pastor began getting people seated for the service. I noticed the casket at the pulpit for the first time, and was glad it was closed. Still, I had to wonder, a simple, unadored, almost ugly coffin that had been chosen for Kimber's mom. I knew the Diastros had money, Quite a lot of it, actually. It was interesting, almost insulting choice. Poor Kimber. Kyle and I stood Kimber up and started over to the pews, but she stopped abruptly. I'm ready, she said, and she brushed her hair away from her wet face. Ready to leave. I can't be here anymore. It's a disgrace to my mother. Kimber raised her head a notch and set her jaw. And his look meant there would be no reasoning with her. Kyle and I looked at each other. This wasn't the plan. It'd be a lot more obvious if Kimber was missing from the service, especially with low turnout. You guys go over and say what's rehearsed to my dad. Kyle, I will text you in 30 seconds. Go. Kyle nodded and started over. I knew we weren't arguing. Mr. Disastro was finally standing, looking over at the front pew reserved for him and his daughter with hesitation. Mr. Diastro? I said as we approached. I'm very sorry to hear about your wife. She was, shit, I forgot my lines, a great woman who raised a wonderful daughter. Kyle finished. Yeah, he spat. Did a great woman commit suicide, leaving their wonderful daughters alone in the world? Ah, shit. Do great women jump off buildings and make spectacles of themselves and leave their families to deal with the publicity and the grief? Kyle's phone chirped, thank God. Oh, that's Kimber, Kyle said a little too fast before he had the time to actually look at his phone. Oh man, she isn't well. She's crying and feeling sick. I'm gonna go help her. No! Mr. Diaster yelled so suddenly that Kyle dropped his phone to the ground where it made a loud clattering on the stone floors. Not you. You don't help my daughter. You don't even talk to her. He can go. And he pointed at me. Ah, okay, I stuttered. The plan had changed too much. I needed to somehow get the car keys from Kyle without being seen. Kyle gave me a shaky, subtle nod, and then he and Mr. Diastro went to sit down. It was obvious Kimber's dad was keeping eyes on Kyle. Getting the car keys from him was going to be nearly impossible. I backed into the shadows at the back of the room while the pastor started the service. I texted Kyle 4 times asking him to help, but he wouldn't dare touch his phone. He just stared straight ahead, flickering worried glances at Mr. Diastro every few seconds. After several minutes, I went to find Kimber to see what she wanted to do. But she was in our meeting spot by the back door. The plan was falling apart. I pulled out my phone and sent her text. Where are you? Kyle is next to your dad. I can't get the keys from him. I waited in the hallway, tapping my phone against my hand nervously. After a minute or two, my phone vibrated. I'm sorry. I left without you guys. I had to get out of there. I'm so sorry. I'll be back before the end of the service, I promise. Shit. Be safe. It was now imperative that I not be seen. I went to the men's bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and played Snake for the longest 20 minutes of my life. I knew the service wouldn't go on much longer, so I texted Kimber again. You on your way back yet? Did you find it? I sat waiting, watching the minutes tick by. I texted her again. I think the service is ending soon. Where are you? After another 7 minutes of no response, I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. I tried again, and the same result. I was getting nervous. I was about to try a third attempt when 2 people walked into the bathroom, and my phone vibrated with a text. It was Kyle. The service was over. Kimber has the keys. Why aren't you guys back yet? Did you find anything? I left the bathroom out, washing my hands, and received dirty looks from 2 strangers at the funeral as the door closed behind me. I found Kyle, staring out the window looking for my car. Kyle? He jumped. Where's Kimber? What did you guys find? I don't know. She left without me. What the fuck? Why? Where is she? I don't know, Kyle. She left without me, I reiterated. She's not answering my calls or my texts. Fuck. Not mine either. We have to keep an eye on her dad until she gets back. We're not the only ones, Kyle said just across the room. What the fuck is going on? 3 men were talking to Kimber's dad at a corner across the room. Chief among them was Helen Clary, who was flanked by his 2 former deputies. Drisking, retired sheriff, had his hands on Mr. Diastro's arm and was speaking to him in an angry, hushed tone. Kimber's dad was shaking his head and desperately objecting to something. The 2 deputies walked out the front door of the church, and Mr. Diastro sagged against Killian Clary, who sat him in a nearby chair. Something was happening. Call Kimber now, Kyle said. I tried again, and this time the call rang twice and was sent to voicemail. I ended the call and threw up my hands, looking desperately at Kyle. Again, he said and took out his own phone. I got the same result, but felt a joy of relief when someone answered Kyle's call, but it wasn't Kimber. Bill, what part of town are you in? I need a ride. It's an emergency. I waited. Yeah, man, I'm at Northbridge Church as fast as you can. I'm with Sam. I'll owe you. Kyle hung up and then immediately tried Kimber's phone. She sent me to voicemail too. Both stood at the window, anxiously waiting to see Phil's silver Mazda pull up. Kyle chewed his lip, and I tapped my phone. Come on, Saunders. We threw occasional looks back at Kimber's dad until Clary stood him up and ushered the now inconsolable man out of the church. Suddenly, Kyle's phone chirped. We both looked down to see Kimber's name flash up on the screen. Kyle's ears nearly buckled in relief as he sagged against the wall. Kimber, I found it. Kyle opened the text and furiously typed a reply. They're coming for you, Kay. We both stared at the phone waiting for a response. And just then, the sun blinding us and reflected off Phil's approaching silver sedan. We got one. They're here. It was the last message we got from Kimber. When Phil dropped us at the Diaster's house, we found the front door unlocked and no home. My car was sitting in the driveway, unlocked, with the keys in the ignition. Kyle and I drove back to the church, but the funeral was over, and the few people who had attended were already gone. We drove back to Kimber's house again, but it was just as we left it, and no one was home. Kyle lost it by this time and was an absolute wreck. He called her so many times, I'm sure he killed his battery. His calls went straight to voicemail. His texts were unanswered. After a half an hour of begging from Kyle, I finally called my dad. He answered immediately. Sammy, what's wrong? It's Kimber. She's gone, Dad. We looked everywhere, but her and her dad are missing. She left the funeral early, and Kelly and Claire was talking to her dad, and then Samson and Greg left, and I think they went to her house, and they got her dad. I think they're still working for Claire on the side or something, and I don't think they're doing something bad. Whoa. Slow down. Come on by the station and let's talk. I'll take a statement from you boys, and I'll send a couple officers over to investigate the house. Right now, just calm down, Sam. We'll handle this. I hung up and threw my car violently into reserve, jerking the wheel to the left as I hit the end of the driveway. Sam, how do we know we can trust the cops? I'm not trusting the cops. I'm trusting my dad. I said my words, sounding hopeless even to me. I turned into the sheriff's office, and Kyle was out of the car as soon as I slowed down enough to park. By the time I got inside, my dad had Kyle by the shoulders and was nodding solemnly at everything Kyle was telling him. My dad saw me. He motioned for the officers to take us to his office. After a few minutes, he came in and sat down across the desk from us. Alright, boys, I'm gonna have Officer Ramirez come in a few minutes and take a statement from you both. I want you to know that at this point in time, it looks like the Diastros left town voluntarily. No way, Mr. Walker. Kimber would never. My dad held up his hands for silence. Let me rephrase. Jacob Diastro left town voluntarily. Kimber is a minor and has no legal rights here. If her dad said they're leaving, they're leaving. But she's not answering her phone. And we went to the house, Dad. Nothing was packed. Maybe they're just getting away for a while. Maybe going to her relatives. I can't theorize as to why she wouldn't answer her phone, other than maybe she wants to be left alone for a while. Kyle was exasperated, but look, I know it's hard for you to understand, but losing a family member takes a toll on a person. Sam, you know that. We don't know how people are going to grieve, and we don't have a right. I think it's very likely that Kimber will be back by the fall for school. The fall? Sheriff Walker, that's 2 months away. You need to investigate now. Kyle, I know you're upset, and no one said we're not going to investigate thoroughly. Like you investigated Whitney's disappearance thoroughly. I spat. I didn't regret the words. Sam, he snapped with more force than I ever heard him use. I'm tired of listening to you insinuate that I didn't do everything I could to find Whitney. I love your sister more than you can imagine. She's my daughter, Sammy, and I will never give her up. And what about the deputies that left the funeral to go after her? Kyle interrupted. My dad raised an eyebrow at you. Samson and Greg. I ground out through clenched teeth. He sighed. Boys, Samson and Greg left the funeral because I sent them out on a call. I stood up violently, knocking over my chair in the process. Oh, come on, Dad. Alright, that's enough. The sheriff slammed his hand on the desk and stood up. I told you, and I would tell you what I know, and I have. I understand your friend is important to you, and goddammit, the Diastros are friends of mine too. I promise you I will use the full extent my resources to track them down and put your minds at ease. But until then, I can offer you is assurance that there is no sign of foul play at this time. You boys need to get off the warpath and let us handle it. Now Ramirez is waiting in the hall to take your statements, and the both of you are going home. Understood? I said nothing and glared at my dad. Seething with rage, Kyle stood up and walked out of the room with no emotion whatsoever. He walked past Ramirez and I followed him out to the car. We got in and I waited for Kyle to say something. I heard a loud sniffle and looked over at him to see. His face was slick with tears. It was the first time I'd seen Kyle cry, but not the last. He's lying, he whispered. I just shook my head. I didn't know what to believe. Kyle turned his face away from me. I know he's lying. Something bad is happening and he's lying about it. What happened? I heard more sniffling. Kyle tried to collect himself. Dude, fucking talk to me. What do you think happened? Kimber's gone. Like the others. She's at the place where the bad things happen. I punched the steering wheel. How the fuck had this happen? Not Kimber. Please, not Kimber. Was all this because of me? Had her mother killed herself because of something I'd done? Something we'd found? Was Kimber taken because of me? If I thought it for 1 minute, that was true. I knew I'd crack into tiny pieces. No, not Kimber. No! Yes, Sam. Fucking think about it, Kyle yelled at me. It's the treehouse. It's all the same. Borrasca, the Skin Men, the Triple Tree, your sister, the mountain. It's all the fucking same. It's a Prescott empire. Now Kimber's been fucking consumed by it. Where do we go? I could feel the warm tears of my own desperation and hopelessness sliding down my cheeks. What do we even do? What do we fucking do? Kyle threw his hands up in frustration. We have to go to Apricot, right? It all starts and ends at the Triple Tree, Sam. Surely you figured that out. We've been to the treehouse 1,000,000 times, Kyle. There's nothing there. I don't know where the fuck else to go, Sam. I jumped as someone tapped on my window of the car and wiped the tears off my face. I rolled down the window as Officer Grigg leaned down to look at my car. You boys move along home. Alright? Yep, I said and turned the keys in ignition. Officer Grigg waved at us as we pulled out the parking lot, but we didn't wave back. The treehouse, Kyle said. We drove in silence, both of us trying desperately to get a hold of ourselves. If we were going to be of any help to Kimber, we needed to calm down enough to think logically. I parked in the space next to the trailhead and saw several bikes tied to the post. As we made our way up the West Rim Prescott Ord Trail, we passed Parker and a couple of his friends coming down it. I nodded to him and Kyle said nothing, just stared up the trail reaching for the only place he knew to go. It was almost dark by the time we got to Apricot, and there was a little light left to search for whatever Kyle hoped to find. It took half an hour in the darkness before I finally convinced Kyle that there was nothing there to help Kimber. And though we didn't speak of it, I knew that he and I were both painfully aware of all the sounds of the night. We were scared, terrified down to our bones, that we would hear the piercing, scraping, grinding, and metal screams of the monster of Borrasca that we'd become so accustomed to over the years. We both dreaded it, prayed it would not come, and we did not speak of it. I dropped Kyle at home and promised we would find Kimber tomorrow. I swore we would. He gave me nothing more than a shallow nod and disappeared inside his home. My dad was waiting for me in the kitchen when I got home a few minutes later. I didn't look at him. I walked over to the fridge, realizing I hadn't eaten all day. Sammy, sit down. I want to apologize for today. I took out some chicken and cheese, went to the pantry for bread. I know you're scared, and I know that a lot's been going on, but you can't exactly relate to, he sighed. And had been depressed for a good long while, Sammy. Over 20 years. That weigh on a person. I ignored him and continued making my sandwich. I was dying inside, wondering if I could even trust the man I'd called my dad for my entire life. She was suffering, Sam. Sammy boy. And sometimes people who suffer that deeply don't know of any other way out. She knew her depression was hurting her husband and her daughter, and she mistakenly thought she was just doing them a favor. Mom suppressed, I said without taking my eyes from my task. He sighed. Your mother is coping. And this was very different. Sam, Kimber's mom has been depressed since she was in her 20s, early in her marriage, and suffered multiple miscarriages. Infertility can be hard on some couples, and not even Kimber's birth could totally ease her pain. Dad, with all due respect, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Kyle and I are getting up early to look for Kimber. I threw the knife in the sink with a loud clang and turned to look at my dad for the first time. Please tell me you're still trying to find Kimber. The sheriff stood up from the kitchen table, looking as tired and disabled as I felt. I promise, Sammy. And I finally believed him. The next morning, when I pulled up to Kyle's house, Parker came out to meet me. Hey, Parker, I said when I rolled down the window. The cool morning air wafted in. Kyle's not here. He left around 5. Stole my dad's truck. He's pissed, so you better go. Thanks, man, I said, and then rolled up the windows and took off down the street. I drove around all morning looking for Kyle and calling his cell, but he didn't pick up until around noon. Sorry, man, I couldn't sleep. Kyle sounded a bit more stable than yesterday. That's cool. Where are you at? I don't know exactly. A rare spot where I'm getting service. You in the woods? Yeah, she's out here, Sam. Somewhere in these mountains. I can feel it. I know it. Alright, well, let me meet you. Okay. Just come down to the West Rim Trail and I'll meet you there. I was only 5 minutes away or so. And I arrived before Kyle had time to get down the mountain. Mr. Landy's red Dodge Ram was parked haphazardly in a no parking zone, and I figured it would probably be towed by the time we got back. I doubted Kyle cared at this point, though. I crossed my arms, leaned against my car as I waited for him, staring up the dirty red trail in impatience. When Kyle finally showed, half an hour later, he was covered in sweat, dirt, and deduction. So? I said, pushing up off the car. No, nothing, man. Alright, well, let's keep searching. We hiked miles and miles of the mountain that day, but we couldn't find any sign of human life. And for the next few days, if the sun was out, so were we. Kyle was growing more and more desperate. As he should, crossing onto private property to look for logging equipment and mapping, out the country many mines to search the abandoned buildings, but the mountains was big, and the needle buried deep in the haystack. And as the days slipped away, so did Kyle's sanity. Every time I saw my dad, he would give me a sober look and promise me that they were still looking. It seemed to me that even he was growing concerned. The Astor's house remained as cold and empty as the space between the stars above it. On what was the 11th night of our Kimberless existence, I woken out of a troubled sleep by the piercing, whirling, screeching sound of death at Borrasca. I cried myself back to sleep, to the tortured sounds of Kyle's own act next door. We had failed her. Kimber was dead. Now that is a very somber existence that we have here. The tale of Borrasca is not a forgiving tale. As we delve deeper into the story, the characters have grown with us. Their anxiety, their fear, their inner madness, all delving deeper into the story and lore of what is to be and what could be. With that said, we dealt with some difficult topics tonight, and there is hotlines to reach out to if you or a loved one ever feels the feelings that Anne felt herself. And I do also have theories as well as to what took in place. I truly hope that Kimber isn't dead. She's one of my favorite characters of the story. And while we might be going through a lot in this difficult time, I also just want to take the time to theorize some other things about characters. The development between the boys has been truly a tale of friendship, of found family, of something greater than oneself. They've been seeking the truth for 3 stories now, and just when it felt like it was in reach, it slowly sinked away. Kimber was strong, and I feel like her mom passing away was a dejection into her character to make her weak or more meek, so that she could be taken away from the story. I feel like if Kimber was at her full strength, maybe she would have fought back and there would have been some clues. However, my main theory is that this story doesn't really have an entity or an otherworldly presence, but it is going to be about greed or corruption at the root of it all. I truly theorize that the Prescott family is the main evil, and the story will continue to follow them, as they have followed through a harrowing path, or maybe made even a pact to another family, or even possible entity, and I'm wrong, to keep their generational wealth, to own the city. With that said, I do feel like the next story will be truly one of the most interesting ones of the series, because I could not put this read down. I have to know what happened to Kimber, and for our protagonist to finally get the answers he deserves about Whitney. But until then, my lovely Lovecraftians, my darlings of the deep, please leave your comments, theories, like and subscribe, and until next time, bye-bye.